Yeah, so I ended up getting a Nexus 5 from, I didn't get it from Google, but I got it from T-Mobile. The Nexus 5, was, I was comparing that to the Samsung Galaxy S4. So these two are the phones that I compare against each other.
One thing about the S4
Yeah.
is that if you don't happen to get one of the earlier MDK baseband, you have a locked bootloader.
You have
Locked bootloader?
a locked bootloader, so they would not
it's
unlock
highly
it.
locked. It's because they have the Knox software on there now,
Uh-huh.
and it doesn't look good.
Okay.
So you can root it, but that's about it.
But you cannot get a new ROM installed,
Yep.
basically. Yep. And they just recently, I think the Samsung Galaxy S4 just got the 4.4.2 KitKat. They just got it.
I'm guessing it depends on the carrier as well, because Verizon has not pushed out.
Yeah, T-Mobile just did. On Saturday, I went to T-Mobile on Saturday, and the display unit still does not have 4.4.2. They only have 4.2 on it. But the guy went back when he went to the back of the store, probably asked someone, and they said, no, it's available. They just have not pushed it out onto the display unit yet. But it's much more expensive, and the resolution, this is kind of relevant to this class. The resolution of both devices, does anyone want to guess the resolution of these screens? Here's the Galaxy S4, and this is the Nexus 5. I'm going to give you a look of the Nexus 5 here. Okay, this is the Nexus 5, and here's the Galaxy S4. It's a 5-inch display, and therefore the name, Nexus 5. The resolution of the screen is 1080p on a 5-inch display, which I think is just, it's interesting because I cannot see the details without a loop. I have to put on my loop, for soldering the surface mount parts to really, enjoy the full resolution, because I cannot focus that closely. If you want to look that closely, your eye has to cross, and that puts a lot of strain on your eyes too. So I'm not quite sure what they are planning to do with that kind of resolution. Go ahead.
They have like a pixel density of a 442.
Yeah, 442 for one and 445 for the other one. They're off just a little bit. But that means, when you're developing applications, you cannot just go by the number of pixels on the screen. When you design your applications, you have to look at the density as well. In other words, what is the actual size, physical size of my device, and then use that as a guideline to, size your controls and whatnot. Because if you just say, I want this to be like, 100 pixels wide, on a display like this, 100 pixels is like, eek. You can't even touch that with a little pen accurately. So that's one thing that I think would have a lot to do with Android or any type of mobile programming is the focus is no longer pixel. You have to look at the actual physical size to get things look right on these devices. But the other thing is because of the higher resolution, it is a lot better. When you want to display any type of details, it's like it cuts my eyes. When you look at the sharpness of this thing as opposed to my other phone, the Blaze 4, the Blaze 4G, there's no comparison. When I look at the two side by side, the screen size is not the issue. It has to do with the resolution. A single line on this device is like bleeding kind of sharp. Whereas the other one is like, here's a line kind of thick too. There's just no comparison.
So have you already got it, or you're planning on getting it?
You mean the S4? The Nexus 5?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, you got it.
Here it is. Yep. Already rooted. Already running CyanogenMod. I found that the ROM built into it has, it's good, it's okay. It is KitKat. It's basically KitKat versus KitKat. So I'm not, upgrading because I want to get KitKat. the custom ROM has the ability to customize the brightness of the backlight, whereas the factory ROM does not. So with a factory ROM, you can turn on auto brightness, and that's it. Okay, so you have to use whatever the factory set it to, which to me is too bright already, and it's consuming battery like there's no tomorrow. With the custom ROM, on the other hand, I can customize that curve any way I want. So I can customize it to the point where I feel it's comfortably lit, but not too well lit, so that I can conserve battery power. And that's one reason I routed my Nexus 4 is for that purpose. Any questions up to this point? No questions?
How much was the phone?
The phone, if you buy it from Google, is $350 for the 16 gig version. And then they have a 32 gig version for $400.
And this is unsubsidized?
This is not subsidized. T-Mobile does not subsidize anymore. That's the other thing. They're starting to change the way they do all these plans. So with T-Mobile, they're moving away from contracts altogether. In other words, you cannot just say, they will not give you a contract. Okay, now sign this contract. If you get this free phone, you have to stay with us for the next 2 years. There's no contract anymore. Everything is month to month to month to month. Okay, if you don't like this phone and you have another phone, a friend gives you a brand spanking new Galaxy S4, and you say I want to use my Galaxy S4 instead, be my guest. So I think T-Mobile is doing something that's interesting. I mean, they're definitely trying to do something to differentiate themselves.
Well, every carrier has something like that now, though. Every carrier has something like that.
Yeah, but T-Mobile has gone completely over.
Yeah, they're completely.
Yeah, they don't have contract anymore. So whenever I, on Saturday when I walked in, when I moved my plan, because I need to get a new phone, I have to go for the, I don't have a contract anymore.
What happened to your other phone? What happened to your other phone?
Sorry?
What happened to your old phone?
It would not, communicate with the Fitbit.
Oh.
He upgraded so he can connect it.
Besides, it's 2 years old too. It's also 2 years old. The performance of the two phones, also there's no comparison of the performance either.
So did you get that? The
Huh?
Nexus 5?
Yeah, I got a Nexus 5.
TAC is now part of the Internet of Things.
5 or 4 because you said 4 earlier.
No, 5.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. The S4 is the Galaxy, and this S5 is coming out. With the Galaxy S4. This is also related to kind of this class too. Is Samsung does a lot of stuff on top of Android, so it doesn't look like KitKat. I mean, even though it is KitKat, it doesn't look like KitKat. Whereas the Android phone, the Google phone, it's like pretty much stock KitKat. I mean, if you run KitKat in a simulator, that's what you're getting.
One's like Face Off and the other one's like TouchWiz.
Yeah, they have the touch thing, where they have a motion sensor. So when you look at the Galaxy S4, these two, or one of these, things, or two of these things, can detect motion without touching. So you can wave over the phone, and it knows that you're waving over the phone. There was a commercial, I think it's of a Galaxy phone. There was this Korean woman, baking, so her hands are all kind of, with powder and stuff like that, and her phone just rang. So everybody would think, oh, okay, she's going to go, crazy because, now she wants to pick up the phone, but her hands are really dirty. So she just went over and then used her elbow to go over the phone without touching it. And then the phone just picked up and, putting itself in speakerphone mode, at the same time. So she was able to carry on the conversation in Korean, but without touching the phone at all.
Of course it was in Korean.
There's 2 parts to it. I'm not sure. Actually, there's like 3 parts. One is it does have a front-facing camera. The other is it has a infrared proximity sensor. And another is the screen is, I guess, so sensitive it can just detect the static electricity just above the screen.
Some of those devices I know can detect static. I found that out, accidentally. I was not touching the phone, but it registered the click. Fortunately, it's not one of those one-click purchase kind of click.
This one you can go like this and just hold your finger like above an item. And if it supports it, it'll give additional details. Or
Okay, so it's kind of like a hover over.
Yeah, if you're on a lock screen, you can just like move it around.
Is that a Galaxy?
Like yeah.
S4 or
S4.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
On your Nexus phone, it says you only have 2 gigs of RAM. What would happen if you put a 16 gig RAM chip inside your phone?
You can't. I mean, these things are pretty much closed. That's one thing about the Nexus 5 is it does not even have a micro SD card slot. This thing is closed. I mean, the only slot it has is the SIM card slot. So you can replace the SIM card if you want to, but other than that, it's closed. Yep.
I tried doing that before. I told them like, hey, can I improve the RAM on it? Because I wanted to play games.
Do you truly mean RAM, or do you mean storage?
Storage. Well, RAM is a little bit harder because if you want to replace the RAM, sometimes the RAM can be a single chip itself. So you have to know what you're really doing. So you have replaced your RAM chip before on the phone?
No,
Oh, you have not?
I tried to, but
it's not easy to do even if you have the right equipment because the density of the parts in these phones is so high. A typical reflow station is not going to work. I mean, it's just pretty much impossible to do it by hand. A lot of times they use parts that don't have pins that spread out anymore. Instead, they have ball grid array. So with a ball grid array, unless you heat up the entire thing, to close to the melting point of solder, and then just use a hot air tool on top of the one that you want to desolder, you can't really do any type of real desoldering without damaging parts.
And even if you do replace it, there's no guarantee the operating system will register the higher
That is
capacity.
correct. That is correct. Yep. So, but 2 gigs of RAM is plenty for a mobile device. I have not run out of RAM. Even though I have a lot of stuff installed on my phone. So that's kind of interesting. The other thing I also found out was the Galaxy S4 has the ability to run 2 apps at the same time. In other words, it can tile 2 apps, side by side or top bottom, and then you can look at the web browser while you're replying using Gmail at the same time. So that's kind of handy, but it's also kind of hardwired to only 2 apps. As far as I know, it was only 2. Is it true or not?
I know of just doing 2, but I haven't actually tried to do more than 2.
Okay, the guy at the store tried to do more than 2, so he was trying to drag another app into the main screen area, and that would not work.
I'm thinking with some modifications, it may be possible.
Right.
But I would have to look into that.
Yep. But that's also something that is lacking on the Google phone. The Google phone is just running KitKat, stock basically. So there are interesting things. I mean, it seems to me that Samsung is, it's only using KitKat or Android as a base operating system, and they're building, stuff on top of it at the same time as well. All right.
So you said they're building on top of it. Are they modifying the underlying Android OS or?
I think they have to. Because in order to display 2 apps or 2 activities at the same time on the screen, they have to be changing the Android framework itself. Because that's really a part of the Android framework. So how much work is involved, I do not know. Probably not as much as we think it is, but there's still definitely work they have to do with the framework itself. In other words, unless Google leaves behind an API that will allow apps to do it, which I really, really doubt. Because if they did, then their own KitKat would be able to do the same thing, and why would they not implement the same thing on their own phones? So I think Samsung took the Android operating system and actually developed their own code on top of a stock Android system, which has one potential impact. When Google comes up with the next release of Android, there will be a lag time between that and Samsung releasing its own version of that operating system. Do you notice any lag of updates? Well, you still don't have KitKat through your carrier, right?
Not yet.
Right. And KitKat has been out for a few months.
Although Samsung's pretty speedy on that, it's carriers that do their own modification on top of that is very slow.
Yeah, because some carriers like to put in their own apps on the phone, and then they have to re-image the whole thing.
Rebrand it.
Yep, which I really, really hate. That's one good thing about the Nexus phone is there's none of that. It just runs stock. All right. All right, since the most of the class is here already, let's go ahead and continue with that project, and let's see if we can get it finished today. Oh, let me go to SDK first, because I just want to bring this up, so that people remember to do this from time to time as well, is to run the Android Update Utility Program, just to make sure that all the tools that you have are up to date. This is really an easy interface to use. It runs and it finds all the packages. See, right now it says install 5 packages because there are 5 updates. The 5 updates are
SDK, SDK platform, sample for SDK, image, Google APIs.
the check marks. So we have SDK tool for revision 22.3. And the platform tools, that's not updated. So just click that. Accept license, install. If you have a slower connection at home, I strongly recommend that you do it here. You can see the speed is now at 10 megabytes per second.
The largest part is the system image. Download here and do the rest of them.
Yep. So that's why I would do it here. You can save more bandwidth for Netflix at home. In most countries, especially in Asian countries, they use their cell phones as televisions. It's not a novelty thing. It's like, ooh, I can watch TV from my phone and then still go home and watch your 50-something inch TV. It's their phone. I mean, it's how they watch TV and get their entertainment. When your entire house, when your flat is only 300 square feet, and you have a family of 4, your phone is a big screen. Yep.
Yeah, I just got a new Samsung smart TV. And first time getting a smart TV, and I can stream live TV from my TV directly to my phone.
Yep.
And watch it live, and vice versa.
Isn't it better for your eyes though, or like large TVs? Wouldn't that be better for your eyes?
If you look at the percentage of people with eyeglasses, prescription glasses, in Hong Kong, it's higher than here. It can be genetics too. I have no idea whether it's just genetics or whether they just
I believe that's just Asian genetics.
Could be.
My grandfather has glasses, and pretty much everybody on that side of my family has glasses. They're all Japanese.
But it's that's a minor issue. I mean, after correction, I have 20/20 vision.
I always get LASIK. I always get LASIK.
Ah.
If you don't mind conscious sedation and having a laser pointed at your eye, always get it.
It's computer controlled. All right. So once I get this updated, I'm gonna start Eclipse and see if we can finish that project today.
I always think the risks outweigh the gain for laser
LASIK?
eye surgery.
I have been wearing my glasses for so long. I would feel naked without my glasses.
I've had glasses since I was 5.
Sorry?
I've had glasses since I was 5.
Since I was, me too. Since I was 5.
Yeah, I just forget that I'm even wearing glasses.
Until you're not wearing them.
Exactly. You wake up first thing in the morning, you get your glasses. All right, so the update is all done, and now we can go back and start up Eclipse. All right. And I have to say, all the tools they run efficiently coming from a external hard drive, and the connection itself is only USB 2.0. This is not even USB 3.0. So, if you experience any type of lag when you run Linux from a flash drive, it's the flash drive itself more likely than the connection itself.
Well, these school computers just hate my flash drive. It runs so slow.
HPs are interesting because they are exactly the same model, and you will find that certain flash drive will work on some computers and not on other computers. But these are exactly the same model. They're supposed to have the same chipset, and yet they are different.
Like I said before, at home I'm getting around 10 megabytes per second transferring files off of my flash drive, and 4 or 5 megabytes per second transferring it, or something like that, transferring 2. But over here, it's a couple hundred kilobytes per second.
Yeah. Well, I have no idea why we still purchase, HP computers, but I still do. I have all kinds of brands of computers at home: Asus, Toshiba, Lenovo. Those are the main brands that I use at home, and none of those are super duper expensive or high class type of computers, and none have any issues with my flash drives, external hard drives, and whatnot. When I come back to school, you constantly have to struggle with that type of issues. It's why? Doesn't make any sense.
What are you gonna do? School has a contract with HP.
Well, it's a campus-wide or district-wide agreement.
It's a district contract.
Yeah, it's a district contract, so and we're not paying. These computers are not inexpensive either, for what they are.
Well, they buy fives, and you'd think they'd be snappy.
They're actually expensive too, which is the part that really got me. All right, so we're going to continue with this program and see if we can actually finish it today. I think we can, okay, because for the most part we are done with all the interfaces, and we are now at the point where we can just go ahead and finish up the design of the activity, which is the main screen, and actually see if we can play a few games of rock, paper, scissors, and then you guys can get started with your own projects. I'm hoping that you guys have been shadowing me, so whatever topic I go over in class, you will be applying the same concept with your H2O homework assignment. At least in terms of defining the interfaces and putting in the logic into the model and so on.
When's the assignment due?
The assignment is going to be due about 2 weeks after I assign it, but during that time we'll be moving on to new topics. All right, so let's go to the most important file, which is our main activity, and see where we are at with that file. Okay, so let's go over this just quickly so that we know what we have done so far. The private method called setup model is going to set up just everything from the perspective of this class, which is also implementing the view. To set up the model, we have several things. Last time I drew a picture of all the components, so this time I'm just going to talk about it. The first thing is RPS model, which is just a reference, and also I define a simple listener adapter. Okay, so both of those, we need to create objects first. So on this line, we create a new simple listener adapter as an object. And then on the other line, we create a RPS model to represent the actual business logic of the entire thing, of this particular game. Those two items, one is used in model adapter dot register model. A model adapter, or this particular private instance variable, allows a view to find a model adapter. The model adapter itself is not a model. It is simply a broker to basically say, okay, ask me to deal with a model, okay, from the perspective of a view. In this case, I do all the initialization here. So the model adapter, in this case, needs to know, okay, I'm the model adapter, but who is the actual model? And I have the registration here so that the model adapter knows, which model object is actually responsible to handle the logic. The model itself, the model object itself, needs to know, but who's the listener adapter? And this is the way I set up the listener adapter. And then the listener adapter, in return, needs to register a view, and this is how that is set up. So this sets up, all the links necessary in order for the view to connect to the model adapter. The model adapter will connect to the model object itself. The model object itself, in return, needs to know who is the listener adapter. The listener adapter needs to know who is the view. So this basically sets up the entire chain of references. Are there any questions about this particular subroutine on from line 13 to line 22?
Quick question.
Yes.
Why do you declare model adapter private within the class rather than local within that method setup model? Was there a specific reason?
Can you ask the question again?
Line 11.
Line 11.
Declare model adapter as a private within the class, rather than a local
Okay.
within setup model.
That's because when somebody clicks a button on the screen, I need to tell model adapter and say, oh, okay, somebody just touched the button of rock, paper, or scissors. It's time to tell the model adapter and say, well, I don't know who is the actual adapter, but tell the model through this adapter that somebody just clicked rock or paper or scissors.
So right now, the only place where you access model adapters within the setup model method, right?
At least with the program that is viewable at this point, yes.
Right. Eventually, you're going to use it elsewhere.
Right. That is correct. Yep. But I think the most important part over the past about 3 weeks or so was the isolation of the model from the view. So the view does not immediately use the model and vice versa. Okay, which is already one step more abstract than putting all the business logic into the same file. Okay, so every time when you write an app and you only have one source file, that means you're not breaking up into appropriate levels for not only for abstraction but also to make the program more flexible and easier to maintain in the future. Any other questions? No other questions? All right. And then we move on to take a look at on create. This is the part that we will modify today. This subroutine will get some kind of heavy-duty modification today because we're going to have to design the screen, to actually play the game. So this is the part where we'll register the on-click methods of multiple buttons. So this part will be changed later on today. At this point, it doesn't do a whole lot.
Can you hide the outline?
Say again?
Can you hide the outline? Is that necessary?
Hide the outline.
Right side of the screen?
Oh, you mean this one?
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay. All right. So this is one subroutine that we'll be changing quite a bit today. We'll just kind of move on and kind of finish this overview of all the different stuff we have done so far. This one we're not going to do much about, but I do have one point to mention, because since it's on options menu, the whole thing about options menu is the hard button itself is going away. All the newer devices do not have a hard button for the menu button anymore. Okay, the Nexus 5 does not even have a single hard button on the screen itself. It has the 2 volume up and down and a power button on the other side, and that's it. It does not have any button that's front facing. I think the Galaxy S4 still has 1 button, right, on the front.
It has a physical button and a touch button reserved for It's not part of the screen.
Okay, it's not a part of the screen. The Nexus 4 has nothing. Everything is a part of the screen, except for the volume up, down, and the power button. So all the other buttons are now, quote unquote, soft buttons.
So it's the same way it is on tablets.
Yep, yep. Most tablets are like that too. Yep.
I always find that it's kind of odd for that part of the screen to be taken up by the buttons most of the time.
Right, but what most of the applications are now migrating is they don't even have a menu button anymore. It is now a part of the top part of the application. So on the right-hand side of the top part of the application, it will lay out as many menu items as possible. You can prioritize and say, if I have a long, big band, I can display all these things, as options, so you can easily access those particular options. But for anything else, it will give you the ... like 3 vertical dots on the screen. So it will give you like 3 dots like this on the right-hand side of the top band of a particular screen. So if you look at this as the top portion of an application, on this side, you will have, a control to move up a level. In other words, if you're like several levels down in your application in terms of screens, this will allow you to go back up a little bit. And then on this side, you will have this bar here. If you click on this, it will show you all the menu items that traditionally will be triggered by a dedicated menu button.
What would normally be displayed for an application that does not support that type of interface?
That's a good question. And I'll answer that question later in just a little bit. And then depending on the actual width of this particular screen, it will display out of this menu. It will find out which ones are high priority, and then display it on this band basically by default. But if you have a longer screen, it will display more items. If you have a narrower screen, you may only see 1 or 2 items based on your prioritization. So it's trying to make use of this space of the screen for navigation purposes, to go back to the previous screen, for navigating between screens when you have a hierarchy, basically, of screens, and also to display the menu buttons here.
They started doing that on Jelly Bean application.
Right, but now they're, most
same.
applications are now designed like that. Now, for an older application that does not have, that is not Jelly Bean, so for anything that's before Android 3.0, I think, you would still have the menu button, and the menu button will be system provided at the bottom part of the screen.
Before Jelly Bean would be 4.2.
Is it 4.2?
Yeah.
I think 3.0 is another landmark too. There are new options introduced in 3.0. Yeah, Honeycomb is 3.0. Yep. So all of these things are getting changed, and so that's why when you write an app, it is kind of important to pick the minimum level, or the minimum level of API, because otherwise, if you pick the minimum API level to be too low, your application will look out of date, even though it's a fresh new application, but it will look out of date because you cannot do this at all. On the other hand, if you pick like 4.4.2 as the minimum, then you're going to miss a lot of devices that does not have the latest version of the OS installed. So that's it's a trade-off. Like the Fitbit application can be installed on older devices, you just cannot sync it with the Fitbit device itself, which is okay. You can still log. The whole thing about the mobile application is you can still log your what you're eating, how much water you have drunk, and so on and so forth. But you won't be able to talk to the device, so it will lack the immediate feedback of Tack, you have walked 6,000 out of 10,000 steps, which is your goal for the day.
I just can't believe you spent like probably about $100 on the Fitbit and then another $500 on the phone just because you bought the damn Fitbit. Never mind, I can't believe it.
I can't believe it's not.
I can't believe it's not backwards compatible. I can't believe it's not backwards compatible.
What is the Bluetooth?
The Fitbit.
Oh, not at all. The Fitbit is not at all backward compatible. Well, the other way to go, with the Fitbit is just to use the USB dongle. It comes with the USB dongle, so you can actually just run an app on the PC to to do the auto sync.
Yeah, but that's no fun.
Well, you can always carry your laptop around and turn it on whenever you want to look at your stat for the day.
Is it proprietary locked in data? Is the data locked in, vendor locked in?
I do not think so. I think it's probably a serial communication, and I don't think it's encrypted in any major way. Maybe a little bit.
Except for through the Bluetooth standard itself.
Yeah, through the Bluetooth standard, because it doesn't really transmit anything that is truly worth encrypting, right? I mean, all it's doing is encoding my motion, for the day. I mean, it has the ability to store up to a certain amount of data before it really needs to sync with the device, but none of that really is high security. I mean, what if someone breaks into my Fitbit and know that I have walked 7,000 steps out of 10,000? It's like
found it. You burned 1,000 calories. Woo.
They can put it onto Facebook. It's like tag is is not moving enough. Yep.
So when you pair a Bluetooth device, it doesn't have like a low-level encryption.
Yes, it does, but it's useless for the most
It's like
part.
a 4-pin.
It's useless for the most part. I just looked this up the other day. Since we're talking about mobile devices, which are mostly relying on wireless communication, I just looked this up yesterday. Even with WPA2, there are ways to set up Wireshark to sniff traffic and decrypt it. It's much harder with WPA2 compared to web. Web is useless, basically, just completely and utterly useless.
5 minutes.
For 5 minutes, and you're in. It's like, okay, I can see everything, right? But with WPA2, it's a lot harder.
So
if you want to
just feel
sniff
it have
traffic.
to like the 4-way handshake, or like you could you authenticate them or wait for them to actually connect like naturally, or and
Right.
after that, then you have to try to actually crack the password.
Yep.
Which is like salted with I think the SSID.
And then with WPA2, I think you can see the traffic from all the stations, but each station has its own password too, specific to each station.
And
So
you
when
have to
it's
be close enough to be able to capture the 4-way handshake, which is a pain because before you didn't need to
Right.
connect at web, you could just be anywhere within router range and you're
right,
good.
because you need to you need to get to the other device itself and not through the router.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. So WPA2 does offer significantly more security compared to web, but it's not unbreakable. You just have to wait longer.
Or RAID mode table. Or a hash table.
Hash table. Yep. So that means with your mobile devices, your only way of communication is wireless. If you want to do anything that is sensitive or require that requires a high level of authentication, with websites, definitely go for HTTPS. There's no reason to use HTTP at all these days.
Or just do a VPN to your home server.
Say again?
Or just do a VPN to your home server if you're out and about.
Right, and the VPN does it use SSL for encryption? Is that?
Yes.
No, it just uses AES encryption depending on the level you choose when you set up the server.
Okay.
You also do poor man's VPN and use SSH.
Hmm?
You use poor man's VPN by SSH.
Yep, SSH is a viable alternative.
So I think I
as well.
set up like 248.
Well, SSH is actually a fairly useful protocol because it allows tunneling. So you can actually get a lot of stuff through by one single connection. And it's also well supported by most computers on most platforms. All right, so getting back to this code, we are finishing up the code that we have written up to this point. This part, we just wrote it so that we can get some feedback when the state is changed. This is also when we found out when you are inside the event handler, like onClick, you can try to do updates to the text field multiple times, but it doesn't actually do any updates until it goes back to the system. And that makes sense because it's a loop. In other words, we are talking about what we call an event loop. Okay, an event loop goes like this. So let's say this is the Android framework, which is outside of your application. This framework is basically running quote unquote a loop as far as your application is concerned. So as far as your application is concerned, it looks like a big loop here. And the entry point to your code, is inside the loop here. Let's say we call this, event handling. I'll just call it an event handling hook, which is basically, if nothing happens, the system is basically suspending right here. Okay, it is just pausing at this point. When somebody clicks a button on your screen, what happens is this loop, gets a chance to continue. So at this point, it will call your app. Okay, so this is your actual app here. And it will call the right event handler. In this case, the only event handler up to this point in this application is that one single button. Okay, so the on-click method of that one single button is the only thing they can call. It will do whatever update is here, and then it will return back to the event loop. The event loop will then proceed to see what else needs to be done with your particular application, including updating the screen, including updating the text views, the screen size, background color, and stuff like that. And then eventually, after doing everything, it will get back to this point here and just wait for the next event to happen. So it makes sense that you can try to do all the updates here to the text view, but nothing gets reflected until the control is back to the event handling hook, back to this loop here, and get to the point where the actual update is going to happen. Because when you do a text view set text, it is only updating the object itself. There's no obligation that says when you update the object itself, that the actual whatever is displayed on the screen will get refreshed right away. There's no guarantee that set text would have to do that, because you're just setting or changing the internal state of an object. Whether it is reflected right away on the screen or not is a whole different story. Is that part making any sense? That you may not get the updates right away. Okay. Right. So this is the way we have our application at this point. So the next thing we're going to do is to change the our screen so that we include the additional buttons. Yep.
Looks like you may be able to initiate a redraw before it exits by calling a invalidate.
Okay. So you can invalidate right away and make it
force it to refresh.
Force it to redraw.
Yeah.
So that would definitely be helpful. In certain types of applications, in this one, it's not going to be helpful because yeah, you can still you would just see like that all the updates with no delay in between.
For debugging purposes, it will be useful.
For debugging purposes, it will be useful. Correct. But by default, the set text only changes the internal state. All right, so getting back to the main design of the application, we have hello world here, and I can either remove test and then add my new buttons here, or we can do something else. So we'll go ahead and just remove test here and then start with new buttons. So I need okay, so this is the part where the view is can change, and okay, I'm just gonna change it. I'll change the design later on. I need 1, 2. I'm just thinking about how I want to design the interface here. We'll just go ahead and use the simple one, which is one button for each choice. It's not necessarily the only way to do it, but we'll do it this way first. This one is rock, and this one is going to be paper. And you can see that I'm using the string table or the string resource for all of these items. This way, if I want to convert this program to a different language, all I have to do is to go through the string resource table and not having to kind of go over the entire program to look for literal strings. All right, that, rock, paper, scissors. All right, so now we have rock, paper, scissors as 3 different buttons. Well, let's just do it this way for now. Okay, so now that I have the buttons defined, I can go back to my main activity and specify what to do with each button. If I want to specify what to do with each button, this is the kind of code to do it. And let me save all the files first, because you can see that button test does not exist anymore. And I forgot to rename the buttons, so they're all kind of generic. All right, so we have the first one, and we'll just copy and paste some code here. Okay.
Name the button.
Oh, button 3. Thank you. All right.
Would that be valid for the system?
Yes, it would be valid for the system. Basically, the last one becomes the effective one.
So it just skips over the first one and just executes the second one?
Correct. Because there's only one on-click listener actually attached to the view. Whatever one you set last is the one that it's going to use, which is kind of cool in a way, because you can change the on-click listener halfway through the program. If you want the button to respond completely differently, you can actually attach it to a different on-click listener halfway through the program. That is completely determined at runtime. All right, so with the first button, which is rock, we can determine what to do with the on-click. Now this is the part that I really don't like, because I'm going to do it in a way that is simple but not necessarily the best design. But for the purpose of just illustrating how to use a model adapter, this will suffice. Okay, so I'm going to just do it this way here. All right. So when the user clicks rock, then what we'll do is simply to say model adapter. You remember the model adapter, ADAPTER, is our broker. And now we have to pick a method to call. So in this case, we are going to call the method user choose, because the user has chosen a particular choice for this game. And of course, I cannot just use choice, because choice is just the name of the parameter. I need to replace it with rock, paper, or scissors here. So in this case, because for this particular button it is rock, I'll just go ahead and pick rock. Now there are several ways to deal with this particular situation. You can have all 3 buttons to have the same on-click listener. And then inside the on-click listener, inside the on-click, you have the parameter called view, right? So at that point, you can actually try to differentiate. Is it the rock button? Is it the paper button? Or is it the scissors button? And then choose to do things differently. So there are several ways to do it. This is just one way to do it. This is the most obvious way to do it, but not necessarily the best structure to do it. Does everybody see what I mean by that, more or less? Okay, I'll do it this way first, and then if we have enough time, I'll switch it to the other way so that you guys can see, well, which way is actually a better way.
Wouldn't it make more sense for resource-wise to only have one listener for all 3 buttons rather than have 3 listeners?
If you only have one listener for all 3 buttons, and you use a table to keep track of this button object corresponds to this choice, this button object corresponds to this choice, it makes it much easier later on to add, Spock and Lizard.
But also
Because you just extend the table a little bit. But here you have to duplicate the entire, setup routine and the method too. So it makes it easier to maintain with the other one. Because if I need to change the logic of how to play the game, now I have all this code sprinkled all over the place. Whereas the other one, uses a more like a data-driven approach. So the choices, as far as the game is concerned, is contained completely inside the table. But the logic to trigger the model adapter is separate. But here I got everything all kind of mixed up, right? But it is more obvious this way, at least for now, we'll do it this way. Right, so this part here, we have to say rock, and it doesn't find it. Variable, some of the choices. It is choices dot rock. Okay, that's it. And then the other ones will do something similar. So we'll have rock, paper, and scissors. Are there any questions at this point? I'm just attaching, I use one button for each choice for this game, and I'm attaching the logic of what to do here. Does this part say anything about how the rock, paper, scissors game is played? Not at all, okay? All I'm saying is somebody click the button named rock. Okay, well, my broker who's responsible to find out who is responsible to handle the logic of this game, do something about it, okay? I don't even know whether somebody is responsible to do something about it, but if there is, do something about it. Now, at this point, when you look at this code here, does it necessarily say that the logic of this rock, paper, scissors game is on the device itself, inside the application, or does it say anything about this may be cloud-based? I need to set up a cloud cluster to play rock, paper, scissors. But you can be playing with other people too, because if you hide the back end completely, you can be basically playing this game with somebody else through a server, right? So at this point, I have completely separated the logic, of the game itself, how it connects to the game itself from the view itself. The view is just saying, okay, this is clicked. I know somebody is responsible to handle it, and that's it. That's all I'm going to do. Is that okay? All right. So this is the first part, and there's another method that I need to define. Oh, state change is still state change here, which is okay. Okay. So we'll go ahead and play this game at least just once. This will only play the game once because. Well, potentially multiple times if something really weird happens, because if I win, the state of the model would change to user wins, and at that state, I should not be able to make a choice anymore. I cannot play the game anymore. The only choice at that point is to continue to play another game or to get out of the game. Okay. At this point, we don't have the necessary logic to handle that part. But we'll go ahead and see what happens when we just run this program at full speed and play the game. And I forgot one thing. Yep. I forgot to start up a virtual machine, that's why. Minor detail.
Maybe starting one right now as well.
Oh, you think it starts it automatically?
Yes.
Yep, it starts a big one too.
It'll be one time though.
Uh-huh. The one that's starting is a big one too. I think just the other day, on campus here, I think I saw a person using a 7-inch tablet as a phone. Yeah.
When I worked for Samsung for a little bit, there was people that would come in and have the 10-inch tablets, and they go, "Is this a phone?" And I said, "Would you actually want to use that as a phone?" "Oh yeah, I want a big phone like this." Like, what? Why would you want that up next to your head?
It's like I would just see it like have like a little hand strap on the back of it, just like, hello.
Well, I can see people using a Bluetooth headset with those devices. That makes perfect sense. I mean, you have your device on your bag, in your bag or something.
I know someone who has a Note 3 that uses it like a regular phone.
Must have big hands.
Not really. His hands aren't any bigger than mine, but it looks like he's putting a TV to the side of his face every time he takes a phone call.
My wife went to China, I think it's like more than 2 years ago, and everybody were using iPads, the full size, the big iPads, as their de facto cameras. So when you go to any place that's scenic, then you see all these people with their 10-inch tablets, and looking at the view like this. It's like, I think you're kind of missing the point.
Instead of actually seeing the scenery, you're seeing a sea of iPads.
Yes, exactly. Yep. I mean, I'm a camera buff too. I have my SLRs and stuff like that. So I understand. Sometimes I do not enjoy the scenery using my eyes. I look through things with my viewfinder. But in order to compose, I first have to look at all the alternatives. So I still have to kind of enjoy the view, but not these people. And they turn on movie mode too. It's like, okay, let's take all these movies. What are you gonna do with that movie?
There's cool things that you capture with the DSLR or SLR in general that you can't with your own eyes though to get sometimes, because you can get extra long exposures and see what they do, especially at if you do night photography.
Right.
So I've seen reports of people at concerts they're spending there all their time looking at the screen recording versus actually enjoying the concert.
Yep, missing the point. All right, that's not working. So let me see if I can just start a regular device, my smallest device.
Why do you have so many AVDs set up? Have you been testing?
He was doing it earlier on, showing the different setups, different screen sizes. He just hasn't cleared them out.
There we go. So let's wait for this one to start up. Oh, the other thing I found out between the Nexus 4 and the Samsung is the Samsung uses digital stabilization, whereas the LG or the Nexus 5 actually has an optical stabilization. So they're different.
Is it any meaningful optical stabilization?
I do not know, but I know it works because I was just playing with my phone. I was pointing my phone to the 1080p screen, the monitor itself, and just I'm gonna take a picture of the screen itself. Click, okay, and then when I look at the actual picture, I was able to see the pixels. It was at arm's length, about this length here. And when I looked at the picture, I zoom in and go like, it's going to be fuzzy. Because one, it was at night, okay? And my screen was not particularly bright either. So I was thinking, all that motion blur, would blur up the whole thing. No, I was actually seeing individual pixels on the screen. I was impressed. I mean, that was like, wow.
I'm looking for a video stabilizer that doesn't just shrink it down.
That's a digital one.
I want it to.
The optical ones don't do that.
No, I wanted a digital one that's post processing. That just sort of fills in the missing area with previous detected scenery.
That gets kind of difficult because you're not just looking at a 2D thing like a camera, but you're also relying on there's also a time difference too. So that might get a little difficult because you need to buffer up, and when you're doing processing, you're not just doing processing like what is the current state. You also need to look at all the previous states too.
It's mainly just recordings, stationary recordings, but the camera moves ever so slightly at times, and if I enable stabilization on my phone, it uses a lot more power and heats up. And after about an hour, it just shuts down the application because it's overheating.
Is
Okay.
optical stabilization hardware, or does?
Say again?
Is optical stabilization hardware?
Yes. That part is actually interesting because that started with Canon. I think Canon put in the image stabilization technology ahead of most other manufacturers. So what they do is they put accelerometers in the lens itself, into the lens assembly itself, and then that thing can detect the slightest motion that you have, and it will adjust for it. So inside the lens itself, they have a particular element that is shiftable. So you can actually shift it and tilt it, in very slight portions. So what happens is the accelerometer is going to a processor inside the lens. Okay, this is not going back to the body at all. This is all inside the lens, and then it would adjust the tilt shift, mechanism to adjust for the motion that it has experienced.
That's assuming it's only for newer lenses that actually have that in them, right?
Correct. So in the case of Canon SLRs, the image stabilization is a lens feature, is not a body feature. You can buy the cheapest possible Rebel, even an old one, and attach a super duper new, image stabilized, super long telephoto lens, and benefit from the lens itself. The body is nothing more than a black box with a sensor. The logic, or the quality of the image comes from the lens itself, which is the way it should be. But it's a more expensive way because now you need those tiny little servos to control the tiny mechanisms inside the lens itself. When you have a 500 millimeter f4 lens, it's no longer a small device. Yep. Hello. I think you might be in the wrong class. Which class are you in?
125.
Say again?
125.
This is room 125.
Yeah.
What time are you supposed to be here?
At 10.
At 10 o'clock. This class does not end until 12 o'clock.
Sorry.
That's okay. You might want to read the door chart and make sure it's the right day too.
Okay.
Yep. Today is the first day of the second week classes, so I think some people might be
Confused.
yeah, they need to know which classroom or which day it is. I'm hoping that she's not in the first 8-week class. No, cannot be, because this is a full semester class. So, this classroom is, occupied, at this
You
time
pick
for
up
the
another
entire
class now,
semester.
don't you?
Oh,
You have another class now, don't you?
I have Linux security class now.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Is it too late to sign up?
You can probably still sign up. It has a wait list of 2 people. But knowing second 8-week classes, depending on the class, my next door colleague is teaching Microsoft Word. She has a full list, full enrollment in her class, and a full list on the wait list. So there are about 60 people altogether, and only about 22 people have responded to the online orientation at this point. Out of 60
Is it
people.
Online?
Huh?
Is it online class?
Yeah, those are hers is online, mine is hybrid.
What's the course name? What's the course name?
Course name is Linux Security. It's CISS 342.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so the game is actually being played. You can see that if I keep clicking rock, sometimes I win and sometimes loses. But this tells me one thing: the assert is not working. Because if the assert is working, it should not, let me click again when either I win the game or the user wins the game. Okay, so let's go take a look at the logic and and see if we can explain why I think something is amiss. Maybe the assertion is not just it needs to be activated first. So let me just go back to the model because all that logic is inside the RPS model class itself. Okay, so we'll focus on user choose because that's the entry point logic of what we are doing here. App makes a choice, that part is easy. App makes a choice is just, this subroutine here, using a random number generator to pick a choice for the application itself. And then I use the user choice to select one of these, switch statements. And within each case of the outer switch statement, there's another switch statement, which depends on the application's own choice. So this part is not mysterious. We got this part done already. And as a result of the comparisons, I would end up either with no winner because both me and the application are choosing the same choice. The application wins or I win. Okay, so I have 3 cases like that. No big deal. Oh, you know what? I forgot to put in the assert here. That's why it does not tell me that something is not right, because I did not even do the assertion. Okay, it does keep track of the user win counter and the user lose counter, which is not reflected on the screen. It increments the game counter, but I forgot to do one thing. I forgot to do the assertion with the other ones. In other words, once I have a state change, okay, this is the part that I need to do an assertion here. What should I assert? Does anyone still remember the state diagram? When can a user choose a choice, like rock, paper, scissors? There's only one state where this transition can originate from.
When there's no winner.
When there are no winners. So I really need an assertion here that says the following. State has to be no winner at this point. Machine state. It can tell that I have a typo and still give me the choice.
There's only one choice from it.
No. But I was kind of surprised that they picked up the typo and go like, I think you meant that, TAC. I think it has an internal counter of how many times I have used the autocorrect feature. So after 20,000 times, it will give me a warning and say, TAC, I think you need to do some more practice with programming, or I'm reporting this to Derek.
I'm thinking it just made a list of all the different different types that have that name.
Yeah.
And check to see if there's multiple ones.
But that requires logic, So what if I type 2 T's instead of one, when I type, state, S-T-T-A-T-E?
I'm sure Dr. Booth will be very forgiving.
I don't think it'll catch it.
I don't think it would catch it either, but it's only a few steps away from also catching that. Because, what it can do is to match what I have typed up to this point and actually calculate, quote unquote, the distance from all the known variable names.
Give it a try.
And then, and then you can detect it. Say, well, I think you meant that. Sure, give it a try. And see what it says. Come on.
May have to click on the flag over on the left.
It doesn't pick up, there's a name already called machine state. Okay. So it has limitations.
So I can see it easily being able to detect a case error, but really something
So it can only fix partial idiocy,
Right.
not total idiocy.
It's interesting, something like this, would have taken me a little bit more time to fix because the compiler would catch it too. This is something that the compiler can pick up. It's just go through a few more compile,
When you're writing
iterations.
a program, you don't realize you're making a typo. You just keep going. You don't catch it until you compile it.
But what if I have a variable with uppercase ST?
Well, then you're screwed. You'll be searching around, debugging, trying to figure out what your error is.
All right, so let's go ahead and run the program again, and this time, it
Did
should
you save them?
cause problems. Huh?
Did you save it?
Yeah, it saved all of them.
and when you run it, it will save it.
Yeah, it will ask.
Or at least
check.
ask.
Okay, so we'll play rock, no winner. Okay, let's see this time. I click rock again. It's not, the assertion should have failed. Maybe it's just reported to the cat log, the log cat.
Move it up and look at the log right there.
Nothing.
No, the log. Look at the log cat.
That is the compiling. Look at the log
Oh,
cat.
okay, sorry. Log cat.
Nothing there.
You can't even see it.
You may have to make that
Assert.
window.
There we go.
You may have to make that window
Yeah.
larger.
No assertions. So maybe changing logic to assert if it's not state equals no wonder.
No. When you assert,
Wait a
you
second.
assert what it is supposed
So
to be.
you shouldn't be able to play again if you have a winner.
Correct. That's the name, the logic of the game. And it's not doing anything with logcat. Search for messages, accept Java.
Select that and delete all of it. Okay. Just want to make sure it's not looking for that and filtering it.
Yeah. As soon as I move, it comes back. Export selected item to text file. I'm just selecting search here.
The errors.
It's not debug, I know for sure. Well, let's go ahead and.
You're not really, I don't feel like you're really using assert state as a condition. I mean, it's just true or false. It doesn't control whether or not you actually continue on.
It should not. That's the whole point of the assert statement. It should not continue at all. Nope. All right.
Time to figure out why.
Yep. Okay, they're by default disabled. 2 command line switches allow you to selectively enable or disable assertions. To enable assertions at various granularities, use the dash enable assertions or -EA switch to disable blah blah blah.
But that's for Java, not.
Sorry?
That's Java only, not Android Java.
Right. So that means here with Android Java. This one, I try not to click overflows, Stack Overflow.
Maybe you Stack Overflow just get a glimpse of what direction you're going.
Right. Okay, assert is a class.
If it's highly uploaded, it's usually pretty decently reliable, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the many I philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Well, we can give it a try. Can I use assert? How to use assert? Most of the time, a person isn't running in debug mode, but rather some optimized code. Okay. And two references to other things. So open new tabs.
Looks like it's turned off unless it's set to developer and debug.
Right, but that's controlled by Eclipse here, so it has to be an interface somewhere in Eclipse to enable that. So in Eclipse, inside the project itself, properties, resource, Android, filter, or search. Yay. All right. So where's assert? Okay, this allow identifiers called assert. That has nothing to do with enabling the feature assert. This allow identifier called enum. Nope. Okay, somebody just suggested just throw an exception. Don't use assert, just throw an exception.
How about assert true?
Assert true should always be true, right? I mean, it should always assert. I'm pretty sure it's not the expression itself.
Assert false.
Assert false, either way, I mean, that's sometimes it should trigger, right? So that's not a problem. Consider usage of assert to be developer's tool rather than runtime always check. cert won't work in Android because most of the time the person is not running in debug mode. Well, let's go ahead and just throw an exception then. ADB shall set prop debug as cert 1. Does work on my local machine. Nobody knows how to do it in, or at least with this. In this case, nobody know how to do it in Eclipse.
Looks like you have to work.
This shouldn't be accepted and accept the accepted answer because it doesn't answer the question. But setting system property debug assert. So it has to be a feature inside Eclipse to do it. Okay, let's Well, the alternative to do this is, is to use, to throw an exception. So basically, you check for the negation of the condition that I want to be true. If the negation is true, then I throw an exception.
Game over. Game over.
Say, need to be in no winner state.
We're gonna try catch.
The try catch, has to be outside. I think it's just that. Insert new keyword. There we go. But that won't work because that means the other one, whatever I'm overriding, also needs to have that. That's what is complaining. So I can add exceptions to that one too. Okay. I will look into this and find out how to get assert to work, because if I can get assert to work, that's the way to do it.
The way it's showing it in the Android stuff is that it's like you have to use so you have to import junit.framework.assert and then assert equals.
No, that's the other assert. This is the assert statement itself. That's the assert class. So you can use the assert class, to do it, but you should be able to do it just using the language. So anyway, I'm not going to spend too much time at this point because that's not the focus. But the game is working, except for one thing. When it does report that we are, that one person is winning, it's not changing the user interface to say, do you want to play again, and then reset the game. So if I want to do it that way, where am I going to put that logic? In other words, I need a place where I can hide the 3 buttons once I determine who won the game, and then present another button that says, do you want to play this game again? Okay, so where do I put it? Inside. Say again? Inside here. Play, no, inside, got that logic. Need a bigger earlier. Nope, wrong file, sorry. Right here. This is where I need to put it, because this is the only place where a view can get something back from the model. whenever the state of the model changes, this gets called in the view. So in here, in addition or in place of setting no winner and stuff like that, I can now select what to do with the other buttons. For instance, right here, if I'm switching to no winner, this would be a good time to re-enable all 3 buttons. So that means I can now say find view by ID r.id button 1 dot set. Oops. I just want it to be visible again.
Can you do a loop and just dynamically change button 1 to button 2, button 3?
Yes and no. If you want to use a loop to do it, you need to. Okay, there are 2 ways to do it. One real way to do it. You need to have an array of references to views to correspond to button 1, button 2, and button 3, or at least the IDs. Once you have the ID or an array of the IDs, they can just go through that thing and say, okay, for each item in this array, go through this process and turn on the, turn it back on, set the visibility back to a 1. Right now, I'm just changing the, setting the visibility. Set visibility, void, okay, that's what we want. Set the enable state of the view related, okay. Visibility can be visible, invisible, or gone. All right.
Making it visible instead of disabling it?
Say again?
You're intending to hide the button versus just disabling it?
I'm just hiding it.
Maybe it's just
Question is, who's defining the visible? Yep. Okay, so I can do the same thing with all 3. And the alternative to do it is to use an array, pre-initialized to the buttons, and that's not impossible. I mean, that's one way to do it. But for now, I'm just going to focus on the main logic here. We can do the refinement, a little bit later. Yes, copy and paste is not a good approach. Okay, so here I'm turning on all 3 buttons, because I'm ready to play the game. In the final state, or if the user wins, I would hide those buttons. So I would copy it here, and also here when the application wins, and turn all of those to invisible. Yeah, it's really kind of cumbersome.
It works.
All right.
make one function.
Or you can group the buttons into a group inside the screen, and then just turn the entire chunk invisible. So that would be a nicer way to do it. But I'm just not gonna go too far with refining that. All right. But I need one more button now, because once I get it into the win state, either the user wins or the application win, I also need to have another button to say play again, or another way to specify that you want to play again. So the easiest way to do it, even though it doesn't look very good, is to utilize another button.
The back button.
The back button?
All
Now the back button has its own use. It backs you out of the entire game.
Did we
So
set
that's
it
how
up
you
yet?
get. Huh?
Did we set it up yet?
We have not set it up yet. You can touch the screen too. You can have a on touch for the entire screen to reset the game to play again. So if you want to do it that way, we'll do a similar code here, but this time to initialize this set on. This is an activity, so I should have my own set on click. It's not. Oh, I don't need to set on click because I can just specify on click here. Oops. The activity itself does not have it on. Okay.
Can an on-click be a property of the button?
Well, I was trying to capture a click on a touch on the screen itself. So I think it's a touch, not a click. But the touch is not reliable. Let's just give it another button. Let's change the ID to again. Change the text. Alright, so now we have another button here, but for every state change, I also have to be careful, which one to be visible and which one to be invisible, and also when the whole thing starts, I also need to kind of determine that as well. Well, more or less, because initialize is always called first, so I think I'm okay there. So let's switch back to main activity and get rid of this part. I now have one more button. So the first thing to do is to register the handler for that particular button. So it's not button 3, this is button play again.
Please save.
And the way that it's supposed to work is to invoke play again. From the interface itself. Yep, that's it. Okay, now, but in terms of hiding and unhiding the buttons, I now have one extra button to deal with. So in the no winner state, that play again button should not be visible at this point. Yeah.
You know what they say? It's not broke, don't fix it.
It's perfectly valid as long as you exercise caution.
Exercise caution. These will have to set it to visible. I'll show you guys another way to do this that's actually a lot cleaner and also a lot more maintainable down the line. But the initial state also needs to do this. I might as well turn these into a subroutine because I'm using it so many times.
And basically call it every time you need to.
But there's actually a better way to do it. There's a better way to organize it. The final state, I don't really have to do anything, because everything's going away soon, so there's no need to process that. All right, so let's save all of them.
I like the subroutine way.
Hmm?
I like the subroutine way because if you ever wanted to change the way that it reacts, you just have to edit the subroutine. So.
Right.
Give it a parameter, say visible, not visible, and just have a not this value.
The initial state, though, it has that button visible on first run.
But the app is okay.
I mean, it's set to invisible.
See, this time is no winner, so I click scissors twice. All right. Well, the game is working.
What would be cool is if you
Wow.
could see what, like, change the view so that it shows what you picked and then what the computer picked.
Aha. Okay. Now that's a good question. The question, or the suggestion was, it would be nice to see what the user has picked, and also to see what the application itself has picked. But there's nothing to expose it at this point, right? Remember, the communication between the view and the model, is going through the interfaces. Okay, there are like several levels of interfaces in between.
Got a few levels of abstraction there.
So that means, if you want to pass anything back, you will have to modify, those things in order to pass, any additional information back, either way. Okay, so there are several ways to approach that problem. And but besides, there's one more thing that the screen probably needs to reflect is how many times the user has won and how many games we have played up to this point. We keep track of all that information in the model, and yet none of that is visible here, right? Okay, so how do we get that exposed? There are several ways to do it. The first way is the wrong way. Let me show you the wrong way first.
Probably in the same way you'd have to expose the what the app is picking.
What the app is picking?
Yeah, the same way that you would expose the information about what
Okay.
we're tracking in the model. It's probably a similar method.
Okay, the first thing that has to be modified will be the view adapter or the listener adapter itself. Okay, when you look at the listener adapter, at this point, this is the only way for a model to pass anything back to the view. Okay, because this particular adapter goes from the model to the listener adapter, and then the listener adapter will basically update the views. Okay, so in this case, state change is only reporting the new state. It doesn't report anything else. So one thing we can do is to change this one so that we can reflect, a whole bunch of other things here. In other words, instead of reflecting just, the current new state, we can also reflect the 3 numbers that we have been tracking: how many times the user has won, the application has won, and how many games we have played, total. And if you want to also reflect the choices, we can also add, those parameters here as well. However, if we go in that direction, that means we have to change a whole bunch of things every single time. Every time you want to add one more thing to report back, you will have to change this also. Is that making any sense? So another way to do this is to abstract the entire thing and say, when I do a state change, I can report a bunch of stuff. Okay? And then that bunch of stuff becomes a new class. So that new class, can now be the communication means between the model and the view.
So it's another layer.
Well, yes, another layer, but that means, this layer can basically stay unchanged, except, so unless you have something that requires to know, that something, nothing needs to be changed. So there are several ways to do this.
So the new class would change multiple views, basically.
The new class will be utilized in model because model eventually has to deal with the listener adapter. That new class also needs to be known by the view because the view, is the one that takes this call eventually, and it has to handle it. And then the interface to a view also has to be changed, because it has to implement a method to deal with that change as well. So now, but once you make that change, then anything in addition to to all this stuff only has to go to that one class, and you don't need to update the entire chain of stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it that way. So what I'll do is I'm going to change this first and add a new class. And we'll call this class stage change details. Okay, is that generic enough as a name, and yet descriptive enough? Because the only purpose of this class is to encapsulate, okay, when I am reporting a state change, what kind of details do I need to specify to pass from the model back to the view? This is the only one that I need to deal with, and we'll go ahead and add this class. So now we can start to specify, exactly what we need to do, so we can report back a few things. Okay. For instance, we can report back, choices, the user's choice, and the app's choice. We can report back the integers. Okay, user win counter, user app win counter, and total. The number of games that we have played up to this point. We also need to report back the state change itself, which is an enum. So we have state change new state. What else do we need? Okay, that's about it for now. Okay. In fact, what I'll do is I will intentionally forget to specify a bunch, because I want to illustrate, what if we miss something and we need to add it back? Well, let's see how much more work we have to go through once we are using this abstraction. Okay. All right. So now we have this. This is state. I think it's called machine state. Machine state. There we go. All right. So now that we have state change details, we have to kind of change the listener adapter and everything along, with that to make use of that. So instead of just reporting back a machine state, we'll just say, well, I will give you an object called a state change detail object, and that's it. But once I change this, we'll have to change everything that refers to this particular interface. So we'll see. I don't think refactor can deal with this.
I think you called the class state change details, not detail. Maybe not.
State change details, right?
Hey,
Right. And that should trigger a whole bunch of crosses. Yep, as expected. Alright, because state change can no longer just report back a state, I'm now reporting back an entire object. Okay. Now that's kind of nice because I have one subroutine to kind of encapsulate all of that stuff. Most of that stuff, not all. Okay, so here we can say state change details. Okay, now we have a few choices. The new choices that we have is how do we specify the actual values of these things. Technically speaking, each one should have its own set and get pair of methods in order to get its value and also to change its value. Okay, that really is the best way of doing things. But at this point, I just want to get it to work first. Okay, so we'll go. That's also a trade-off. If I keep going like this, my program will get kind of dirty, real fast, and then I have to spend even more time to fix it. So I'll just go ahead and show you what I think is the proper way to do it. The proper way to do it is to make all of these private, which means you cannot change them from the outside. To change them from the outside, you will need methods in order to do it. So we'll have here public methods to do it. So all the set methods will be void. And I think the tool, actually has a way to do it.
Yeah, if you remove that, you can have it automatically specify it. So right-click on user, or
click first.
Yeah, bring up the suggestions. Great.
Create getter and setter for users. Get a name, set a game. Same thing. And then the other thing we can also do is to change the constructor so that we can stash everything into the constructor as well. Now, does it have an option to do it automatically?
I haven't dug that far. Yeah.
No, doesn't seem to have an option to do it.
There probably is a way to do it. Just don't know it.
Well, the easiest way to do it is to do it by hand, right? Stage change details. All right, so we'll have the two ants first. It doesn't really matter, how we choices user, choices application, machine state. Yes. Okay. And then inside we'll just go ahead and say user gets u. App There we go. Okay. So once we have all of these defined, I can now go back to the model class. Model class is down here. Save all the files first. So this way, when I create the object state change details, I can just give it everything right now. There's only one problem with this approach. The main problem with this approach is if I switch the order of the first two parameters, the compiler cannot check because the compiler does not understand which one is the user choice and which one is the application's own choice. So so there are pluses and minuses using this particular method.
I think it can also identify it by name as well, versus just the type.
Oh, okay. So that means in here I can say refer to the name of the parameter and specify its name using this method. Yep, I'm pretty sure I used u. I think that only applies when you have optional parameters.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all right. But in here, I also need one more thing now because I need to keep track of the user's choice. There's no, I do not remember that. So the choice made by the user also has to be remembered. It will be set in user choose. So now we have to say user choice gets choice itself. And then when we create the state change details, now we can include user choice, app choice, app's choice. And then one more thing. And one more thing is the new state. Okay, so the new state is state itself. All right. this one, so it does not report state. It is now past details. So, all right, let's see what else do we need to change. Well, it was a good thing that I think I used one single focal point to call state change. So this is the only place I need to make modifications to. And then we look for simple listener adapter. And this one needs to be changed as well. So now we have state change details. We'll just call it D. And then pass that along. Now we did change iView to do the same thing. So instead of using a single machine state, we just say state change details. Say, and the main activity is the last one to change. Go to state change. So now we can refer to just a portion of the whole thing. So we can now say d dot get new state. So now we have the program back to where it was, but now we have a very easy way to also give the view more information when the model says, okay, we got some changes here, because now I can now actually reflect what are the choices made by the application and also made by the user. So is that answering your question, Chris?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We can also now tag on to the additional thing, like how many times the user has won, how many times the app has won, and how many games we have played up to this point. But tag, you did not remember to put it inside state change details. What are you going to do now? It's easy, right? If I want to add more details, into the state change detail thing, I can now just go to state change details, and I can, if I don't want to change the, constructor, I can keep adding stuff here, right? Total games played. I can just add this one here, and hover over, create getter and setter, and nothing gets changed. I'm not invalidating anything.
Yay, Eclipse.
Right? So I can add more stuff to it, but without having to trigger any additional changes. None of the interfaces need to be changed. The adapter doesn't need to be changed. I only have to make use of this when I think I want to make use of it. So that means all the additional changes are now kind of shielded from the amount of details that I want to pass from the model back to the view. Yep.
So in short, it's easier to just make a new class to handle all that stuff.
To encapsulate everything.
For encapsulation of all the data.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't seem to make sense initially because we only got one thing to pass. But as soon as we realize, hey, I want to pass this along too, and I want to pass this along too, and I want to pass this along too, instead of adding more and more and more and more parameters, we just say, okay, turn it into an object. Because initially it looks like a high price to pay because now we have to go through all the, all the stuff that we need to do to put in this one single class. But in the long run, it is nice because now we can now expand this particular class any way we want to with minimal impact to code on either side.
And it's all just depending on how we get the stuff back from it.
Right. Yep. So are there any questions about today's lecture? Because I'm a little bit over time already.
I have a question.
Yep.
Can you possibly upload this?
Yep.
All of it?
You mean the video or the project file itself?
Project file.
I can upload it.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Because, it's great
Absolutely.
to have the lecture, but if you don't have the
code to look at,
it's a little, it's kind of hard to see it. Because I tried to watch over the weekend, I was like, oh wait, can't. Because it stays stuck on this one view for so long while you're talking. talking.
You need to open up like 6 YouTube views of the same video,
Yeah.
and have one to freeze at one point, and then the other to freeze at some other point.
And a lot of times you'll talk about the code in a different part before you actually switch the view to it. So
The problem with it, getting this version is that
I'm okay with getting this.
already it's been modified extensively since he did the talking about it.
Yeah, I'm okay with getting this version